I welcome everyone and anyone who ever listens to this recording. Today's topic is something that deserves to have a separate talk on, namely the three types of enlightened beings. Now, at the very beginning, I would like to emphasize that these three types are not different in their attainment, namely enlightenment, which means that they are free from all kind of suffering and they are not forced to any further incarnation. They differ in the way these three kinds of beings attain to that purity, so to say. And this is not about what kind of path take on. So it's not about whether you got enlightened through Bhakti Yoga or Jnana Yoga or Karma Yoga, but we shall see, in fact, in which they differ, because in all cases, these three may appear or may not appear, so they don't depend on particular paths, but they depend on the way they attain to this purity. So at the first part, I would like to first speak about these three, like what they are and why they are important to know about this. And then there are two other things that are worthy to mention, which are in fact the differences between the paths of arahants and that of bodhisattvas, and we shall get to that soon. So let's start with the three types of enlightened being. In fact, various sutras describe this, but if we don't accept what the sutras say, then what we can do is, in fact, to look at these three and see if there is another kind of possibility. And if there is, then we will tell those that wrote the sutras that we found something new, which is, rather implausible, but you know. All right. So the three types of enlightened beings are: number one, an arahant; number two, a Pacheco Buddha; and number three, Sammasa Buddha. Now let's take them one by one and let's speak about their characteristics, and then we can analyze how they differ. So we started with an arahant. As we spoke about the 10 feathers, and we said that someone who has eradicated all the 10 feathers is to be called an arahant. If we want to describe what an arahant is, it is a being who is no more subjected to suffering and rebirths. This is what we could say if we want to give a brief definition. Now, in a sense, all three types of enlightened beings are some kind of arahants, as we gave the definition as someone who has eradicated all suffering and therefore there's no more subjection to suffering and rebirth. Therefore, in fact, even a Sammasa Buddha, for example, Gautama Buddha, is to be considered a type of arahant. But because these are three types of ways how one gets to that point, this is why we take differences, because the difference between arahants and the other two is that a being listens to the teachings of a Buddha, and this is how they become arahants. So we might say in a way that they are dependent on the teaching of a Sammasa Buddha, for example, so a fully enlightened being. That they always return. So for example, this can be seen a lot of times with beings who have been on the path of the Buddha, that even though they are reborn on different places on the planet, for example, they still somehow get back to the point where they finished in their past incarnation. They continue from there. This is because it creates a kind of energy within reincarnations, within rebirths, that one is again drawn back and back to the path that they have already walked. Furthermore, it's also because as the Buddha described the path, that first one becomes a stream enterer, then a once-returner, non-returner, and arahant. The moment one becomes a once-returner, there is no question that one will become an arahant. Now, you might ask the question, is it possible that somebody who does not follow the teachings of the Buddha becomes a stream enterer and once-returner, non-returner, and arahant? And the answer is obviously a yes, because this is not teacher-specific, this is attainment-specific. So if you have eradicated all the first three feathers, regardless of what kind of way you did it, you may be called a stream enterer. Because, as I said, even a Sammasa Buddha, which means a holy, absolutely enlightened being, even they are called arahants. So, the feathers are the same for all beings, the 10 feathers, so they do not differ. So the moment somebody gives up the first three feathers, they become, in a way, a stream enterer, a sotapanna, and the rest as follows. So an arahant is someone who listens to the teaching of previous Buddhas, for example, or a Buddha, and through that teaching, they get rid of defilements, impurities, feathers, and therefore they slowly become arahants. Now, most of the disciples of the Buddha became arahants even during the lifetime of the Buddha, but many others, take on incarnations again and again to dissolve and eradicate all the feathers, and then they want to become arahants as such. Now, the school of Buddhism, which takes the ideal of an arahant, which means work on your enlightenment, give up the feathers, and be free from everything, is, Theravada Buddhism, which means in English the path of elders, because this is the one which did not make any mixing with other kinds of already existing paths. For example, if you look at Tibetan Buddhism, it has created some connections with the Bon tradition, which has been there before Bodhidharma went there and established Zen. Buddhism was also in China before him, but he gave a big push to all of that. Now, so this is what an arahant is. It works on its own enlightenment to the teachings of Master, a Buddha, and they get enlightened by that. Now, if we move to the second type of enlightened being, which is a Pacheco Buddha, Pacheco means lonely in a wide sense. Now, it simply means that imagine that we are in medieval times in Europe, where there is not much practice of Dharma and enlightenment, and say that there's a being who has just had this intuition that they want to get free from this. So as I said, there is no proclaimed teaching by which they could go. So the only way that they can get enlightened even at that moment is to start to meditate on how does manifestation happen in the world. Like, we ask this question, like, how did we get to this point? Like, why especially such a birth? Like, why is this so? And it is said that such Pacheco Buddhas, beings that seek this, meditate on dependent origination. Now, dependent origination is a topic that deserves a different talk, but what it is in fact how, from the moment of not knowing, from the moment of ignorance, you start to get karma, you start to get mental formations, you start to get from those craving, clinging, feeling, consciousness. This is not the order of the origination. I just enumerate some of those steps. and then you have craving, and then also you have suffering out of it, which means also birth and ultimately death. So, beings that have no kind of dharma that they could follow, nor do they have a vow that they want to attain absolutely perfect enlightenment, those beings can decide to meditate on dependent origination, like here is this craving that here is this birth that I have, which is going towards death. Where does it come from? And then they start to meditate on the previous action in creation, so to say, which led to this, and then the previous and the previous, and they go so forth that they get to the very first moment when there is a simple ignorance, a not knowing, out of which all formations and craving and types of consciousnesses arise. And this is how they get enlightened. Now, the reason why they are called lonely Buddhas is because if we take the absolutely enlightened Buddhas, the Sammasa Buddhas, we will see that the Sammasa Buddhas come from a lineage that cultivates a lot compassion, joy, loving kindness. So it is cultivated to the peak of it. This is a big difference. It does not mean that Pacheco Buddhas and Arahants don't have compassion. They do, of course, because that is a major part that you give up the feathers, unavoidably you will attain compassion too. But the major difference is that absolutely enlightened Buddha, Sammasa Buddha, in fact, delays its own enlightenment as a Sammasa Buddha. They are called Bodhisattvas that we will speak of. And this is how they get to absolute enlightenment, that they cultivate it so much that they also won't need a teacher, so to say, to get enlightenment. This is the same also with Pacheco Buddhas, that they not necessarily need a teacher. They just meditate on how this all came to be in steps. And out of this understanding, they can get enlightened. And as the sutras say, at least, they don't really proclaim the Dharma, they don't really teach, they might give, support to beings that suffer, but ultimately they will not be seen as, so to say, world saviors as a Sammasa Buddha might seem. These are the Pacheco Buddhas, and then the very interesting one is that of a Sammasa Buddha. For example, that was Gautama Siddhartha as well. Now, Sammasa Buddhas are also called self-enlightened ones and absolutely enlightened ones. It is seen as the highest possible attainment because, again, all three are free from any kind of further suffering. But as I said, you see, they did it differently because an Arahant listens to a teacher, and through the instructions of the teacher, they get enlightened. A Pacheco Buddha already not necessarily has a teacher that keeps supporting him, them. Therefore, they just meditate on becoming, and then they understand and they also become free. Whereas Sammasa Buddha, those who know Mahayana Buddhism or have some kind of knowledge about it know that the ideal of Mahayana Buddhism, which means great vehicle, is the Bodhisattva. Now, Bodhisattva means, Bodhi means intellect and Sattva means pure. So they are those who cultivate pure intellect, pure mind, so to say. Now, what a Bodhisattva, many Bodhisattvas take a vow that, for example, one of the greatest Bodhisattvas is Avalokiteshvara. He said that he shall not attain absolute enlightenment, any kind of enlightenment, final enlightenment, till all the planes of existences are not empty. So he said that he gives up his final enlightenment in order to support sentient beings, or with other words, with even better said, to make sure that there is no more suffering. As you know, as we spoke about Dharma, and as we said that Dharma is impersonal, a Bodhisattva does not say, I want to save sentient beings, because they know that there are no, so to say, sentient beings. Rather, there is just suffering, and that is what they want to quench. And therefore, you immediately see that they might enter enlightenment as, for example, an arahant would enter enlightenment and just be free and just go. But they decide to suppress, to delay it to the moment, as they say, till all suffering is quenched. Now, it's very interesting, because we must say that there has never been Bodhisattva that has ever fulfilled this vow. Now, in fact, this vow is a supportive aspect, because so when we speak about Bodhisattvas, which means, pure mind, there's a so-called bodhicitta, which is the consciousness which arises within the being that for the sake of all, they want to delay their enlightenment so that they may help them in every way. This is called a bodhicitta, which is definitely a wholesome kind of consciousness that arises. And in order to uphold and support this bodhicitta, they take such vows as, I shall not enter enlightenment till all the hairs are not empty. This was the one kind of vow that another kind of bodhisattva has taken. And it is said that only such bodhisattvas can attain Sammasa Buddha degree of, enlightenment, as for example, Gautama Siddhartha did. He's also considered a Sammasa Buddha, because such Sammasa Buddhas are those that actually proclaim the Dharma when it's, as it is the sutras say, when it's forgotten, they, go into meditation, and they will again find Dharma and teach it for, as they say, men and gods, so that all can be freed. So these are the three types of enlightened beings. And, again, as I want to say that the reason why a Sammasa Buddha doesn't need necessarily a master is simply because they delayed and delayed and delayed enlightenment, because, the moment you create the thought, the consciousness that you want to return to quench suffering, since it's a kind of, as a great yogi said, a desireless desire. Of course, we might not say that it's out of ignorance, but it still leads to some kind of, becoming, rebirth in the planes of existences which are in a way or another suffering. So this is why they don't need a teacher, because they have cultivated wisdom so much continuously that at some point it just bursts out, and they simply don't need necessarily a teacher that will tell them, do this, now do that, now do that, because they have so much knowledge within themselves that they can just look at something, and right away the knowledge about that something may arise within them. Like they actually, we might say that they gain this knowledge out of past incarnations, and that particular incarnation, when a bodhisattva becomes a perfectly enlightened Buddha, then they do it because, out of the knowledge of past incarnations, and then they just review all that knowledge, and they can get to the conclusions that Gautama did. So these are the three kinds, and I keep saying that they all three are absolutely free. And the difference now you see is the way it is approached. Now, there is this, well, not many times I have seen this, but I have seen this several times, that those who hold the goal of arahanthood, that you work for your enlightenment and you get enlightened and you're done, and those who hold the goal of being a bodhisattva. And I have heard some, of course, those are not who practice a lot, but those are some things that people make remarks on, like those who are on the path of an arahant, that want to become an arahant in the future. They might say that what kind of nonsense is that? Somebody wants to delay their own enlightenment so that they can support sentient beings. After all, suffering just goes on and on. So what kind of vow is it that one wants to, quench all suffering? This is what one on the goal of the arahant might say. I don't say that everybody says that. In fact, almost nobody says that, but it is something that it is a remarkable difference and a remarkable way of getting enlightened, both of them, in fact. Now, to such a claim that being a bodhisattva is a wrong way of doing things, I would like to make the remark that even Gautama Siddhartha, who then proclaimed the possibility of becoming an arahant, has been a bodhisattva first, and then he could teach the goal, the aim of the arahant. So if somebody who follows the Buddha then says that the path of the bodhisattva is absolutely wrong, then they immediately slander the Buddha, because they say that what the Buddha did was wrong, and yet you still practice his teachings, which means that you enter duality, which means that you don't see clearly this aspect. Now, those who say that are on the bodhisattva path and say that arahanthood is not correct because there is egoism in the sense that one wants to get enlightened and doesn't support sentient beings. Now, to this, the other remark I want to make is that it was Gautama Siddhartha, who was a bodhisattva and then became a Buddha, who claimed the possibility and the fruit of arahants. So Gautama was a very beautiful example, which, out of which the two ideas come. And he was the one who went on the ideal of bodhisattva and then spoke of the ideal of the arahant. And right now, neither the path of the bodhisattva who claims that the arahant is wrong is impossible, because Gautama Siddhartha spoke about becoming an arahant and then attaining peace. And also those who say that the path of the bodhisattva is wrong because you delay your own enlightenment, it also becomes not correct to say so, because Gautama Siddhartha himself delayed his own enlightenment in the past in order to get to the point where he got. So neither of those two claims have any kind of basis, because there is a being who in fact got there with one of them and then spoke of the other one. Now, if we speak about consciousnesses, like what kind of enlightenment they get, all of the three, in fact, get the fruits of becoming an arahant, because there is not a different consciousness that arises in the moment of enlightenment, pure absolute enlightenment, than that of the fruit of becoming an arahant. So, the consciousness is the same, because that is when nirvana is fully realized, so to say. It is the way they go to it and the way they receive it and attain it that makes the difference. Now, there is a third kind of interesting thing that we might speak about, and that is the question of avatars, which are divine incarnations, such as Krishna. Also, Buddha is taken as one, in fact. So what's the thing with divine incarnations? Like, if somebody comes as a divine incarnation, it means that they have already become enlightened previously, and right now they are back here, apparently doing the same thing. Like, what is that? and also want to adhere Ramakrishna and Ram as such examples. Now, out of the point that an absolutely enlightened being shouldn't come back because it would mean that they are not absolutely enlightened, because out of the standpoint of a Buddhist, it would seem like then they are not fully enlightened, which appears to be not really correct, because even fully and truly fully enlightened beings that we know out of experience and out of their teachings that they were, we accept them as enlightened beings, have promised to come again. So what is that like, are they then not fully enlightened, or are their claims to come back not true? Now, what happens in fact is that, imagine a being that is absolutely fully enlightened and has seen everything from ignorance to death, and they also understand all the phenomena, and there's nothing that they couldn't know. Now, the moment that they pass away, they might just create the seed of coming once more back to support suffering, to quench suffering. And in fact, this is not to be seen as wrong, because it is in fact, again, well, it is for the welfare of quenching all suffering, and a being will not become unenlightened just because they decide to come back once more. Again, they might be perfectly enlightened, and just one moment they create this wave of consciousness that they desire to return. And again, this is not a desire as it is, for example, lust. It is rather an empty desire, knowing that it all in fact doesn't matter. And for example, Paramahansa Yogananda spoke about this as a desireless desire, that one returns. And therefore, even fully enlightened beings do return sometimes, not too many times, but sometimes they do return in order to quench suffering, to lessen suffering. And therefore, avatars that are seen to come back are not to be seen as unenlightened ones. After all, this is the reason why they are called avatars, divine incarnations, which simply means that they have gone beyond this, and here they are again, knowing that they have gone beyond this and that they are here again. So in fact, also avatars go into the category of Sammasa Buddhas. They are like bodhisattvas, but bodhisattvas that are perfectly enlightened, but have this wave of this seed of consciousness that they desire to come back, but not for anything. Like, it is not to be taken as a desire with an object, like I want to come back to see you again. Not such a thing. Rather, just a desire to continue the work, so that the lifespan will not interrupt the support of sentient beings. We might say it as such. So even avatars are to be taken as absolutely enlightened beings. Now, when many avatars also are seen as having gurus. For example, Ramakrishna had two masters that aided him on the path. Like, why is it so? Couldn't he get enlightened by his own knowledge? And the answer is that most likely he could have done that. The same goes for Krishna as well, and many others. They could have done that. But there's a very important reason for which they did so. And that is because they wanted to show they are the perfect examples for human beings. And therefore, they wanted to show that the presence of a teacher is important, because if one does not have enough knowledge, as, for example, Gautama did, then one might think that they are on the path and that they do things well. But because you don't know what you don't know, you may end up not going towards enlightenment at all. And therefore they show an example that they go to a guru, and then this is called in Faith Lila, which is the play of the divine, that they could really get enlightened right away, not right away well, but by their own insight, but they play in a way that they need the guru, because when they are born they really do need it, that there's someone with whom they can speak of these things, because even Gautama Buddha spoke with masters, and he spent many years under different masters. So it's all those who aspire enlightenment in a way or another way have gone to teachers in a way or in another way. So even avatars are to be seen as Samasa Buddhas, in fact, only that they show an example to human beings that in fact the guru makes wonders with the human being. And therefore, because if there were too many beings that just got enlightened out of their own power, I mean, it's perfect for them, but many other beings might think that, why would I need a guru if I can do it on my own, which might not be the case of that being. And in order to correct this possibility, they simply go for a guru, for a teacher, and they show that for the people of the future times, that in fact it is important because it sets a direction, for example. So to make a quick recap of these three, there are those arahants who follow the guidance of an already enlightened arahant or any kind of other enlightened being out of the three, and then they work under the guidance of that being, and then they get enlightened. Then there are the Pacheco Buddhas, which means lonely Buddhas, that when there is no Dharma or no already enlightened being, they go and meditate on how everything came to be, and by that understanding and contemplation, they get to understand, and they also get freed. And then there are the third, which are the Samasa Buddhas, which get there by being a Bodhisattva for we don't know how long time, and at some point they become Buddhas. Now it's very interesting to speak about Bodhisattvas in the sense that there is this vow that may I not get enlightened till all suffering is not quenched, and yet all the Buddhas that we spoke of as absolutely enlightened beings must have been Bodhisattvas in the past, and yet they're still suffering here, and they are already Buddhas, or they are already Buddhas. So what is happening here? And what is happening is simply that at some point, also the realization comes in a way that the moment you enlighten yourself, you have enlightened all existence, as we spoke about this, that one realizes one's omnipresence, and one realizes that by the enlightenment of omnipresence, everything is enlightened in fact. So this is one kind of realization that one might take, and then they become Samasa Buddhas. I mean, they start to work towards becoming a Samasa Buddha out of a Bodhisattva. Another way is that even though we say that enlightened beings never return, which is in fact correct, but the even more correct way to say it is that they don't take birth. What it means is simply that it has happened, for example, to Swami Vivekananda, who was the chief disciple of Ramakrishna, that he had a clear vision of the Buddha who has attained enlightenment some 2,500 years ago, and he still could perceive a vision of the Buddha. And we accept Vivekananda as an enlightened being. So we might not say that that was just a hallucination, because he also held the Buddha on a very high place, of course. And so it is best to say that they do not take incarnations, that they are absolutely free from taking incarnations here and there. Instead, they are capable, out of the freedom that they have attained, to, how should we say, appear and disappear at will. That they simply can support sentient beings not by taking an incarnation and then suffering that incarnation, rather out of an absolute reality where they are not touched by anything of any of the words, and therefore they could still work for the welfare of not suffering. Now, there are not too many sutras that, Theravada sutras that say that a Buddha eventually can still support sentient beings, but it is seen out of the happenings that we might see that even Samasa Buddhas might appear, but completely free of appearances, so to say, to those who need their help. So in a way, they create an eternal form out of themselves. For example, that even devotees might have a vision of Krishna right now. Does it mean that Krishna is not free? No, it does not mean that. But it means that there is a form, there is a presence that is here and now, and we might say that this is a cosmic presence. It simply means that if you right now just look around you, you feel that there's some kind of just a presence, not a presence of this or that, but just a presence. And when one becomes absolutely enlightened, we might say that they become part of this presence, and therefore it can be called upon within this presence for those who aspire the help of a certain being. So these are the three types of enlightened beings, and now we might ask the question, why is there not a fourth type? So if we want to find the fourth type of enlightened being, then we might say, why are they enlightened? Like, what is the method? And why are they different from those already three mentioned? Because if you look at it, there are those that take the support of an already enlightened being, namely the Arahant, and then they get enlightened. And there are two others that not necessarily take the support of another master, and they get enlightened. So in this respect, you cannot find anything, because we have already seen those that take support from other enlightened beings, and there are those who do not. So there's nothing in between. It's either like this or like that. There's nothing in between these two. So in fact, we cannot really find a fourth category of absolutely enlightened beings, because there's simply no way. Because there are those who just work for their own liberation, and then they might support sentient beings by this cosmic presence. And there are those who take rebirths on and on, knowing that they at some point will become Buddhas, and then they attain also Buddhahood. Those are the Bodhisattvas. So there is not much in between these, and therefore it is said that there is nothing outside of these three types of enlightened beings. Now, if there are some kind of questions or remarks that those who are present with me right now would like to ask or add, then please. And if there is none, then thank you very much for listening.
I have a question, Krishna. And
yes.
I'm not for sure quite how to ask it, but one can one fall out of enlightenment, say when they've went into the Samatha Buddha, the highest possible attainment? Can they fall from that, and I don't know how to say it, fall from the sky?
Yeah, I understand. So it is impossible when we speak about, like, even an arahant cannot fall from enlightenment, nor a Pacheco Buddha can fall from enlightenment, let alone that which is taken as the highest possibility. They cannot, simply because if you look at the 10 feathers as the basis of discernment, we see that if there are feathers, then one is bound in a way or another way, so there is suffering. If there are no more feathers, it means that all the feathers were eradicated. If they really were eradicated, they do not arise ever again within the being itself. Therefore, they cannot fall from their realization. So when we speak about any kind of enlightenment, whether it be an arahant, a Pacheco Buddha, or a Samatha Buddha, there is no possibility of any kind of ignorance to rise within them, neither in this nor in any kind of future time. There's no way that they could ever again do such a thing.
Thank you.
Yes, in fact, there are two types of meditative absorptions that in yoga we speak of. One of is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and the other one is Savikalpa Samadhi. Now, Nirvikalpa Samadhi can be understood as an enlightened being being able to enter the bliss of Nirvana whenever they desire. That we might call a Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvikalpa means, in fact, without any kind of mental formation. Vikalpa means formation, Nir means without. Samadhi means equanimous mind, equanimous concentration in a way. And when we speak about Savikalpa Samadhi, it is when a being, for example, when a being becomes a stream enterer, it means that they have some kind of a glimpse to the bliss of Nirvana, and they can indeed experience it, but because it does not last, they cannot enter it at will. They have to work again to enter it. It's not just since there are still impurities within them. So if we speak about the stream enterer, which has eradicated the first 3 feathers, it means that there are 7 left, and therefore those are some kind of impurities that make you suffer. And the moment you suffer, there is not even the slightest chance for experiencing nirvana or bliss. I mean, these are not different things. I just said 2 different words for that. So that is Savikalpa Samadhi, and falling from attainment, in fact, can be seen not as really falling from attainment, but there are beings who experience Savikalpa Samadhi, which is in fact nirvana, but in the sense that there in the background there are still impurities within the being. And then many times they think that they have seen the unseen, they know whatever is to be known, there's nothing else to be done. And in this approach, in this standpoint, they do fall in that lifetime at least. I mean, not necessarily, but they might fall if they take this approach that there's nothing to be known, because you empower then your attainment with conceit, which will end up being that you won't even think that there's anything for you to know, because you already have conceit that you saw that. I mean, not necessarily, not all Savikalpas end like this, but there are some who experience bliss and emptiness, and then they think that that was it. And even when they experience hatred and greed, they no longer look upon them as unwholesome, because they think that they have already seen what is to be seen, and therefore they don't need any more work. So in a way, they saw, even those who have not given up any of the feathers might have an experience, like a slight experience of emptiness, but it does not last. And furthermore, they cannot even enter it at will. So therefore, one being can trap oneself with the experience of savikalpa, which also does not last much. It just goes away when the impurities come back. And for example, Swami Yogananda said, Paramahansa Yogananda said that as long as Nirvikalpa Samadhi has not been attained, with other words, the fruit of arahanthood has not been attained, there's always a possibility to fall back. So let's say that there's a being who is really a virtuous being, and of course, if they became stream enterers within 7 lifetimes, they will attain enlightenment. But those who, have seen the absolute for a moment, thinking that they have done everything that was to be done, and then they don't care anymore, right now it's a fortunate birth that they could experience that. But nobody has ever said that the knowledge of one's lifetime cannot go away, not of course not permanently, but cannot be put in the background so much that, so we speak about roots when we speak about incarnations. So there are rootless incarnations, double-rooted incarnations, and triple-rooted births. Now, double-rooted means that they have generosity and love. With other words, non-greed and non-hatred. Triple-rooted means that they have non-greed, non-hatred, and also non-ignorance, with other words, wisdom. So it depends on what kind of consciousness creates your next incarnation. It will be a double-rooted, a triple-rooted, or a rootless. Now, rootless means that there is no non-greed, no non-hatred, and no non-ignorance, which means that it is a greedy, hateful, and ignorant incarnation. Those are anything that is below the human world, namely hell realms, animal worlds, so-called ghosts, which are due to their craving where they are right now. And those are rootless. Even human beings can be rootless incarnations, but humans can also be double-rooted and triple-rooted. Now, for example, if one has really seen the ultimates and not just some fabrications, then it means that it has to be, in a way, a triple-rooted incarnation, because out of knowledge, one can go and attain blissful states. But nobody has ever said that just because right now you have a triple-rooted incarnation, a triple-rooted birth, that you might not lose knowledge. And the moment you use the root of wisdom, of knowledge, then there is no possibility for going for arahanthood either. So this is when Adi Shankara said that if you attain such a fortunate birth that you have all triple roots, okay, this is not the way how he said it, but the gist of it is this, then not working towards enlightenment, whether it be Arahant, Pacheco Buddha, or Samasa Buddha, whatever, it means that you really commit a crime against yourself, number one, against the freedom of this being, and number two, against all those beings that you could have helped the moment you had a triple-rooted incarnation, because all triple-rooted incarnations, triple-rooted births, have the possibility to get enlightened, to attain janus, and to get enlightened, to giving up the feathers. A double-rooted, it is said that there is no possibility to get final enlightenment, because there's simply no wisdom. Like, you might have seen beings that are really loving and kind and generous and all these wholesome things, but they simply don't feel the need to go beyond themselves. And when they don't see the point, so to say, you see that there is no, so to say, wisdom in that incarnation, that right now you might have a double root, but you might do an unwholesome deed as who knows what, and then you might lose also the two roots. So knowing this, it's important to go further on and on and on. In fact, the Arahant path is the way the quickest and the most straightforward, and the one which does not involve, that is the safest one, we might say. That is a reason for which Gautama Buddha claimed that one to go for, even though he did not do it as directly. He didn't go for the Arahant path, even though he attained the Arahant fruit. It wasn't the Arahant path that he took. So one cannot fall from the real attainment. But for example, about jhanas, if you speak about attainment, so about enlightenment, you cannot fall from, if you have become a stream enterer, there is no possible way to lose it. If you have become a once returner, there is no possibility to even go back to stream enterer. If you have become a once returner, because there's a path consciousness that arises the moment one becomes a once returner or a stream enterer or a non-returner or an arahant, there's first a path consciousness that arises, which simply removes the feathers. And there's the fruit then which lets you experience nirvana to a certain degree. And therefore you cannot lose the stage of enlightenment. That's impossible. However, with jhanas that we spoke of, the four or five material, depends if we look at the suttas or the Abhidhamma, or 4 or 5, and then there are the immaterial jhanas. Those ones one can lose because they are conditioned realities. You see, this is the difference between jhanas and nirvana, that nirvana is an unconditioned reality. So the moment you got to a certain degree of experience of nirvana, a certain degree of giving up the feathers, you cannot lose that because those are unconditioned. The nirvana is unconditional reality. Whereas there are conditioned realities. They are conditioned by, number one, the factors that determine the jhanas: as initial application, sustained application, zest, happiness, equanimity, and one-pointedness. So these are the conditions of jhanas. And in fact, let's say that one has attained beautiful infinite space jhana. So it might be very beautiful, but if one creates an unwholesome, or for example, there are 5, if I remember, 4 or 5 deeds that if one does, there are 5 deeds that if one does, even if one has attained the highest possible jhana, we speak about the jhana right now, you will lose it and you fall right away after your incarnation into even lower than animal worlds. These are the killing intentionally one's father, killing intentionally one's mother, killing an arahant, injuring, knowingly, willingly injuring a Buddha, and creating schism in the community of the Buddha. These are the, right now you cannot do it anymore. The 5th one, I mean that one you cannot do because Gautama has left, but in fact, if you create any kind of unwholesomely, you create, like you really want to create a schism in a community of those who seek enlightenment willingly and knowingly they seek enlightenment, even still then that holds that is such a deed that no matter what kind of jhana you attained, it doesn't matter, you cannot be reborn in the according word of the jhana, because all the jhanas have words to them. So infinite space has a word to it, infinite consciousness has a word to its plane of existence, so to say. But if one commits any of these 5, so to say, crimes, there is no, it doesn't matter what kind of jhana you attained, you will not be able to be reborn there. Whereas if you have attained any of the, if you have attained stream enterer, you will not do any of these 5. It is not even a possibility that you will do any of these 5 crimes, so to say. Let alone a once returner, non-returner, and an arahant. These ones would never even do such things, because we say that Sotapanna, stream enterer, surely will not get reborn into a lower world than the human realm. And this is because, number one, they won't do acts, won't do doings that are such unwholesome way that they could go below human realm. So from jhanas, the attainment of jhanas, you can fall. And even, for example, if you have attained a jhana and you have not done anything unwholesome, when you get incarnated again, for example, as a human being, you have to still, in a way, relearn it. You will still have the tendency to know it, but you have to do effort again to get it. So from the attainment of jhanas, one can simply fall, but from the attainment of unconditioned reality of nirvana, there is no possibility to fall. So a stream enter cannot fall from his attainment. Once returner, non-returner, they cannot, and the arahant certainly cannot, and then neither Pacheco Buddhas or Sammasa Buddhas, because those are also some types of arahants. So they are, also categorized into the arahant stage of enlightenment, because that is when somebody is fully liberated. So from those you cannot fall, from jhanas you can fall. Even if you simply neglect entering jhanas, for example, and you just go and do your work and job and whatever, and let's say that you have a jhana, let's say infinite space, you know how to enter, but slowly you just don't enter it on a basis, you might still lose it, just because simply the mind becomes dull, and it will be inactive towards the jhana, and you would also have to, again, put effort if you ever want to go again, because these are conditioned realities. All the jhanas are mundane. So wholesome, unwholesome, and the jhanas, these are all mundane types of consciousnesses. There are nirvana is unconditioned, and therefore from unconditioned you cannot fall, whereas from conditioned you can fall. As the conditions change, you might fall from the attainment, but when there's something unconditioned, it means that you have become unconditioned in such a way that conditions no longer touch you. Therefore, you cannot fall from that. So that is the answer for the question.
Thank you very much. That helped a lot. Thank you.
If there's anything anyone would like to add. And if not, then thank you very much for listening.